direct pathway first. Now, basically you should know as a rule, okay? So this is a rule. All output from the striatum, which is basically your caudate and your putamen, is inhibitory. Okay, all output from striatum, caudate, and putamen is inhibitory, and also all output from the globus pallidus, both external and internal, is inhibitory. Okay, so these are two rules that we have. So let's draw them out here. Output that goes from the striatum, which is the putamen, is inhibitory. And in the direct pathway, the output going from the putamen goes directly to the internal globus pallidus. Okay, so this is inhibitory. And output from the globus pallidus to the thalamus is also inhibitory. Okay, all neurons I draw in blue are inhibitory. Anything I draw in red is excitatory. So let's talk about the pathway now. Basically, the input that comes down from the cortex to the striatum is excitatory. And the input going from the thalamus back to the cortex is also excitatory. Okay, so this is the circuit that we have in mind right now. Let's talk about it. When you're at rest, you're not moving. You're at rest. Your globus pallidus internal is actively firing inhibition to your thalamus. So this arrow right here is active. GPI is inhibiting your thalamus when you're at rest and not moving. GPI actively inhibiting thalamus. Okay, so imagine as if your thalamus is ready to run, ready to start moving, but your GPI is standing in front of it with its hand out and just saying, stop, you're not going anywhere. Just stop, 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 just constantly in its way. So this inhibition is tonically active when you're at rest. Now, what happens when you want to move? You make the plan in your cortex. You make the intention to move. So this intention is going to go down from your cortex all the way down to your putamen, your striatum in general, putamen or caudate. Once it reaches your striatum, the pathway starts now. So it comes down from the cortex to the striatum, offering excitation. Okay, let me just change the color. All right, so now I'm going to move. Stimulation comes down from the cortex to the striatum. Now this stimulation is going to activate or excite the striatopallidal fibers, which are the fibers that go from the striatum to globus pallidus internal. In this case, internal, because this is the direct pathway. The direct pathway only deals with internal. GP internal. Okay? Now, okay, so it's going to excite these striatopalatal fibers, which are these fibers right here, going from the striatum to GPI. Once these are excited, it means that the inhibition reaching GPI is going to be increased. So the output coming out of GPI is going to be decreased. Once this output is decreased, that means there's less inhibition on the thalamus. And less inhibition on the thalamus means it's free to go and stimulate the cortex and initiate movement. Okay? So, ultimately, you have less inhibition on thalamus, and so you get facilitation of movement. Okay, so let's recap. This your direct pathway. This is your cortex. You make the plan to move, you make the intention to move. So these fibers increase in activity. Once these fibers increase in activity, that means more excitation is reaching the striatum. So the striatopalatal fibers will increase in activity as well. But because these are inhibitory, when their activity increases, they're exerting more of an inhibitory effect, more inhibition on GPI. So the output from GPI is going to decrease. And once the output of GPI is decreased, it means that the activity of the thalamocortical fibers is going to increase because there's less inhibition coming to it. And then all this happens and you get movement. Now let's add the action of dopamine. Dopamine is released in the striatum from the substantia nigra compacta. Okay, this is dopamine. In the direct pathway, it mainly acts through D1 receptors. Let's just keep in mind that dopamine, the function of it is to facilitate movement. Okay, so dopamine wants to facilitate movement, and it can act either at D1 receptors or D2 receptors. It has a stimulatory effect on D1 receptors, and it has an inhibitory effect on D2 receptors. So back to the circuit. Dopamine is released from substantia nigra compacta, and it acts on D1 receptors in the striatum. So what is it going to do? We said that D1, it has a stimulatory effect. So it's going to stimulate the output of the striatopalatal fibers. These fibers. It's going to further enhance their output. And the same thing happens when these are enhanced, they exert more inhibition on the fibers that are coming out of the globus pallidus. And then because these are inhibited more, you further facilitate movement because the output of the thalamus is going to increase to the cortex and you have more stimulation. So this is dopamine and the direct pathway facilitating movement.